The cold metal floor of the human ship pressed against Laraya's knees. Her silver wrists were bound, her head hung low, and fear made her heartbeat sound louder than the engines around her. She had always been told humans were beasts, merciless destroyers who burned worlds and laughed as others screamed. Now she was their prisoner and her fate was sealed. 2 soldiers in dark armor stood near the doorway, silent and motionless. Their faces were hidden behind black visors, reflecting the dull red lights of the cell. Laraya waited for pain, for interrogation, for death, but none came, only silence and the faint hum of the ship's reactors. Every second stretched longer than the last. She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "This is how monsters look before they smile." The door hissed open. A man stepped inside, tall, broad shoulders, human. His armor was scratched but polished, his expression calm. He didn't carry a weapon in his hands. Though one hung at his side, for a moment their eyes met, and Laraya froze. She expected cruelty, but there was something else, pity. He broke the silence first. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "We're not going to hurt you." Laraya almost laughed, a bitter sound caught in her throat. Safe on a human warship, the idea was madness. Humans didn't offer safety, they offered death. She turned her head away, refusing to answer. The man sighed and set a folded gray blanket beside her. "You're shaking," he said. "Take this." Then he left, leaving her alone again. Laraya stared at the blanket like it was a trap still. The warmth in her chest grew despite herself. No human had ever shown kindness to her kind before. Hours passed, maybe days, she couldn't tell. No one screamed, no one dragged her to an airlock. Instead, they brought her food. Water and silence, each act confused her more. The stories of her empire told of human brutality, of skulls piled high and planets turned to ash. But here she was simply ignored. She almost wished they would hurt her. At least that would make sense. On the second day, the same man returned. He carried a tray with bread and a steaming cup. "You haven't eaten," he said, his voice even. Laraya glared. "You want me to poison myself?" she spat. He didn't answer, just tore a piece of the bread and ate it himself. Then he drank from the same cup slowly. Her anger cracked for the first time. Why would he risk his life to prove a lie? She reached for the tray with trembling hands, her pride bleeding away with every motion. He smiled faintly. "My name is Arik," he said. "What's yours?" Laraya hesitated, her throat dry. "Laraya," she whispered, the sound of her own name strange in this place. Arik nodded. "Good, Laraya," he said softly. "You're safe now." That word again, safe, and it made her chest ache. No human should speak it so easily. Later, when the lights dimmed, she lay awake. She could hear the steady rhythm of the ship, the soft pulse of engines far below, somewhere beyond the walls. Thousands of humans moved, breathed, worked, and yet no one came for her. The quiet was its own kind of torture. Her thoughts twisted between fear and confusion. What if everything she had been taught about humans was a lie? What if monsters could show mercy on the third day? She asked the question that haunted her. "Why am I alive?" Arik looked at her for a long moment before replying. "Because the war's over for you," he said. "You surrendered." "And we don't kill prisoners," Laraya laughed, though it came out like a sob. "Your kind killed my people," she said. "You destroyed our fleets." Arik's expression didn't change. "And yours killed ours first," he said, voice quiet but sharp as glass. "Do you even know why this war started?" Laraya blinked, lost for words. He sighed again. "Maybe one day I'll show you." When he left the room, Laraya pressed her hands against her face. For the first time she felt shame instead of hatred. Every act of kindness from him burned deeper than any wound. She had expected cruelty, expected death. Instead, she was given warmth, food, and gentle words. She didn't understand humans, and that scared her more than death itself. That night, the ship shook violently. Red lights flashed across the walls as alarms wailed. Laraya jumped to her feet, heart racing outside her cell. Soldiers shouted orders, boots thundered down the hall. The door slid open again. Arik appeared, helmet on, weapon ready. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice urgent. "What's happening?" She cried. "Your people," he said. "They found us." Then he was gone. The cell trembled with explosions. Laraya fell to her knees, clutching the blanket he had given her. The same warmth she once distrusted now gave her strength. For the first time in her life, she prayed, and not to her gods, but for a human. The monster she had expected had become her only hope. The war outside roared, but inside her heart, Something new had begun, not hatred, not fear. Something dangerous and something called faith in humanity. The battle ended after 3 long hours of silence and fire. When the alarms finally stopped, Lariah still sat in her cell, trembling under the faint hum of the engines. She expected human soldiers to return with weapons drawn, to drag her out as a spy or a traitor. But instead, the same man came, Arik Dane, his armor dented, his face streaked with dust and sweat. "You're alive," he said simply. Lariah blinked, unable to believe he'd come back. He wasn't supposed to care, yet here he was. He placed a small medical kit beside her and said, "No one's hurt you, right?" She shook her head slowly. Still too shocked to speak, he gave a small nod, relief flashing in his tired eyes outside the cell. The hallway lights flickered weakly. Smoke drifted through the air. The scent of burned metal filled her nose. She had seen war before, but never this close, never this human. He noticed her looking and said, "It's not glory, it's survival." His voice wasn't proud or angry, only tired, the kind of tired that comes from losing too much. For the first time, she wanted to ask something, but her pride stopped her. Arik caught her hesitation and said, "Ask. Why didn't you let me die when the battle started?" She whispered. He stared at her, then said quietly, "Because killing someone who can't fight back isn't victory." The words struck deeper than she expected. Her empire had taught her that mercy was weakness, but in this human's eyes, mercy looked stronger than any weapon. Days passed in strange rhythm. Arik visited her often, bringing food, checking the restraints, and sometimes talking. At first she answered nothing, but the more he spoke, the more she listened. He told her about Earth, about oceans and forests that stretched beyond sight. He spoke of sunlight that didn't burn and wind that smelled of salt and rain. Lariah had never seen such a world. Her own planet was red and dry. Her people lived under domes of glass and dust. When he described blue skies, her eyes filled with disbelief and longing. One evening, the power flickered again. Arik stayed longer than usual, sitting on the other side of the force field wall. "You must hate us," he said suddenly. Lariah looked at him, unsure how to answer. "I did," she said finally. "Until you brought me food." He smiled faintly. "That's a start." She frowned. "You're mocking me." "I don't mock prisoners," he replied. "I only try to understand them." There was silence then, heavy but gentle. She had never met anyone who tried to understand her. Later that night, Arik's voice came through the intercom. She hadn't known humans could sound so soft when they thought no one listened. He spoke to the ship's AI. "Protect her cell at all costs. She's not the enemy." Lariah froze, heart pounding. He had no reason to protect her, yet he did. Something inside her began to shift quietly, like a seed breaking the ground. The next morning, Arik found her awake and restless. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," she replied. "My mind won't stop." He sat down on a crate beside the door. "Then tell me what's in it." She hesitated, then whispered, "What if everything I was told about humans was wrong?" He leaned forward slightly. "Then maybe it's time to find out for yourself." His words haunted her for hours. That night she dreamed of the stars, endless, silent, and between them, a blue world glowing softly. When she woke, she was crying. Arik stood at the door again, holding another tray. He saw her tears but didn't ask. He just said, "Eat. You'll need your strength." The way he spoke, steady, respectful, almost kind, made her chest hurt more than her wounds. For the first time, she looked directly into his eyes. They weren't cruel or cold, they were human, full of something she couldn't name. "You treat me like I'm one of you," she said quietly. Arik shrugged. "Maybe you are." The simple words broke something inside her armor of hate. No one had ever said she could belong anywhere but her own dying empire. Before he left, she called out softly, "Arik." He turned, surprised. "Thank you," she said, the words trembling. He smiled and tapped his chest plate. "Just doing my job." But when he walked away, she could see the small curve of warmth still on his lips. When the door closed, Lariah sat on the floor, clutching the blanket again. The metal walls no longer felt like a cage. They felt like a strange kind of safety. And in the rhythm of the ship's engines, she found herself listening for the sound of his footsteps. Each time they echoed closer, she felt her heart race. She didn't understand it, but she no longer wanted to. Because somewhere between fear and survival, between war and mercy, she had found something new, something forbidden. A quiet truth she didn't dare say aloud, that maybe, just maybe, the monster she feared most was the one who made her feel alive. Days passed quietly aboard the human warship. The stars outside the small window looked endless, cold and yet strangely peaceful. Lariah sat near the glass, her reflection faint against the glow of the nebula beyond. She had never felt time move so slowly, nor her heart so full of questions. Arik visited as usual, bringing food and quiet conversation. But this time there was a heaviness in his eyes, a weight that didn't belong to soldiers who had just won a battle. Lariah could feel it before he even spoke. Something had changed, something deeper than orders or duty. He placed a datapad in front of her, its surface glowing faint blue. "You keep asking what humans really are," he said. "Maybe you should see for yourself." She frowned, suspicion returning. "Is this another trick?" He shook his head slowly. "No tricks, only truth." She hesitated, her trembling fingers brushing the pad. A screen opened, images, reports, memories. Her breath caught as she saw alien ships firing first. Her own people attacking human colonies, men, women, children running as fire consumed their homes. The screams echoed through the tiny speakers, and her hands began to shake. "This is a lie," she whispered. "We never—" But Arik interrupted gently. "It's real." "Lariah?" His voice wasn't angry, it was tired. Tired of proving what should never have needed proof. "You were told humans invaded first," he said. "But the truth is, your empire attacked us for mining rights on a neutral moon." He turned the pad to her again, showing an old transmission. Her emperor's seal, his cold voice declaring, "Eliminate the Terran presence. Show them their place in the stars." Lariah felt her chest tighten, her mind racing in disbelief. Her people, the noble, proud Etherian empire, had started the war. Every story, every speech she grew up hearing was a lie. Her throat burned as she whispered, "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you deserve to know," Arik said quietly. "And because I'm tired of being the monster in someone else's story." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship was the only sound between them. Lariah stared at the footage looping on the screen. Burning skies, human cities falling under her empire's banners. She remembered celebrating those victories as a child. Now each one looked like a wound. "Do you hate us?" she asked suddenly. Her voice barely a whisper. Arik looked at her, his eyes calm but unreadable. "I did once," he admitted. "But hate doesn't rebuild what's broken." He leaned back slightly, the light from the screen painting his face in blue and gold. "Now, I just want to make sure no one else lives through this again." The honesty in his voice disarmed her more than any weapon. She expected pride or anger, but all she saw was quiet sorrow. Lariah felt her chest tighten again, not from fear, but from something else, something she didn't understand. Humans weren't what her empire said they were. They weren't beasts, they were people. Arik stood up, ready to leave, but she stopped him. "Wait," she said softly. "When your people saw what we did, why didn't they destroy us completely?" He looked back, his expression unreadable. "Because we remembered what mercy felt like," he said, "and we didn't want to lose it." Then he turned and walked out, leaving her with silence and truth. Lariah stared at the screen long after he was gone. Her tears fell silently, tracing cold lines down her cheeks for the first time. She didn't cry out of fear or pain. She cried because her heart finally saw what her eyes had refused to see. Hours later, she found herself whispering to the empty cell, "Humans, you could have destroyed us, but you didn't." The ship's hum answered like a heartbeat. She wrapped herself in the gray blanket he had given her, the same one she had once thought was bait. Now it felt like warmth, a symbol of something new. The next morning, she waited by the door when Arik came. She didn't look away this time. Her voice was steady but soft. "Can I see more?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll show you the rest," he said, "but some of it hurts to watch." "I want to understand," she replied firmly. And so he showed her more, in not war footage, but peace. Videos of human children playing under blue skies, of doctors treating alien refugees, of men and women rebuilding cities they didn't destroy. Each clip felt like a blade, cutting away years of lies, but beneath that pain, something new began to grow hope. When the final video ended, Lariah sat in silence, her mind was spinning. Her heart too full to speak. Arik stood by the door again, waiting. Finally, she looked up, her eyes red but calm. "Arik," she whispered, "your people. They could have hated us forever." He nodded. "Maybe some still do. But you don't," she said. He smiled faintly. I try not to as the lights dimmed. Lariah leaned against the wall staring at the stars. For the first time in her life, she didn't see enemies beyond the window. She saw lives, she saw humanity. And quietly, deep inside, she began to feel something new, respect. Admiration, maybe even affection, she whispered to the empty room. I expected death from your kind. Her lips trembled, a small smile forming. But you gave me truth instead. The silence after truth was heavy. Lariah no longer saw the humans as monsters. But her mind still fought the change. Each time Arik walked into the cell, her heart raced between fear and warmth, and each time he left, the walls felt colder than before one night. The ship's alarm began to wail again. The red lights painted the hallways in fire. Lariah jumped from the floor, clutching the edge of the bench. The door slid open and Arik appeared, his armor already sealed. Weapon in hand, what's happening? She asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her quickly. Your people found us again. The ship shook violently, the sound of explosions echoing through the metal walls. Arik tapped his wrist screen and overrode the lock. Her cell door slid open for the first time since she was captured. She froze. Why are you opening it? Because I'm not letting you die in a cage, he said, grabbing her arm. The moment his gloved hand touched her skin, her breath caught. It wasn't fear this time, and it was trust. He handed her a small blaster, the same weapon her soldiers used. Do you even know how to use this? He asked. She met his eyes. I was born for it. The hallway outside was chaos. Smoke poured from ruptured panels. Sparks rained down like falling stars. Human crew members rushed past them, shouting coordinates, sealing bulkheads. Lariah moved beside Arik, her steps quick, her pulse faster. Every instinct told her to run, to escape, but she stayed close to him. He led her through a side corridor toward the hangar bay. They passed a wounded engineer lying on the floor. Arik knelt immediately, tearing off a strip from his own sleeve to stop the bleeding. Lariah stared. Even now, under attack, he stopped to save someone. Her people would have left the weak behind. Without thinking, she knelt too, pressing her hands against the wound. When the bleeding slowed, the engineer whispered, Thank you. Lariah blinked, startled. No one had ever thanked her before. They reached the hangar as the ship trembled again. Outside, her Empire's cruisers glowed in the void. Their guns blazing blue fire. Lariah's heart broke. Her own people were killing everything she had begun to respect. Arik pulled her behind a crate as the bay door exploded inward. Alien troops stormed in, armored and ruthless. One shouted in her native tongue, There she is, the traitor! Her blood ran cold. She looked at Arik, but he was already standing, blaster raised. Before she could react, he fired, covering her as humans and aliens exchanged fire. Go, he shouted. Get to the escape lift. She hesitated, her heart screaming, What about you? I'll hold them off! He yelled back, but she didn't run. A plasma bolt flew toward him, and without thinking, she threw herself forward. The blast hit her shoulder, pain burning through her body like lightning. She fell hard, gasping, her vision blurring. Arik caught her before she hit the floor. Lariah! His voice cracked through the chaos. She could barely breathe, her fingers clutching his armor. Why didn't you run? He demanded. She managed a weak smile. Because you wouldn't have. He carried her through the smoke, ignoring the bullets and flames. The medbay doors slammed shut behind them as he laid her on a table. Human medics rushed in, their hands moving fast. Arik stood beside her, his armor burned, his eyes fierce. When the medic tried to push him away, he growled, She's under my watch. The lights flickered as the ship steadied. The human counterattack had forced the alien fleet to retreat. But Lariah was fading, her blood glowing faintly blue. She looked up at him, her voice soft and broken. I thought I would die by human hands, she whispered. He shook his head, holding her hand tightly. Not today, he said. Not while I'm still breathing. Hours later, she woke to the soft hum of machines. Her wound was sealed, her body weak but alive. Arik sat beside her, asleep in the chair. His hand still holding hers, she stared at him in silence, the weight of what happened sinking deep into her heart. He had risked everything, and for her, an enemy, a stranger. And she had thrown herself into fire. For him, a human. When he finally stirred awake, she whispered, You saved me again. He smiled, exhaustion written across his face. Maybe next time. You can save yourself, he said softly. She laughed weakly. Only if you promise not to die first, he chuckled. and for a brief moment the war outside didn't exist, only the sound of shared breath, the rhythm of two hearts that no longer cared about sides. In that quiet room, something unspoken grew between them, not gratitude, not duty, and something far more dangerous. It was the beginning of something forbidden by both their worlds. And yet it felt like the only truth worth fighting for. The silence of the med bay was broken only by the steady rhythm of the monitors. Lariah lay still, her eyes half open. Watching the soft glow of the lights above, every movement hurt. But it was not the wound that ached. It was the truth that now lived inside her heart. She was alive because of a human, and her own people had tried to kill her. Arik entered quietly, his armor replaced with a dark uniform. His face drawn and sleepless, he looked at her, and his voice was gentle but heavy. "You shouldn't be awake." "I've slept too long," she whispered. Trying to sit up, he moved closer and helped her. His hand steady and warm. She could feel the care in every small motion, and it made her chest tighten. "Your empire knows you're alive," he said finally. Lariah froze. "How?" He tapped the small holoscreen on the wall and an image flickered to life. Her emperor's face, cold and regal. "Lariah of the Ninth Line," the voice declared. "You aided the humans, betrayed your people, and disgraced your blood. If you wish to regain honor, kill the human who saved you." The broadcast ended with the Empire's crest burning in crimson flame. Her hand shook as she turned to Arik, her voice barely a whisper. "They want me to kill you." He nodded, as if he already knew. "I figured," he said simply. "They'll come for you next." Lariah's throat tightened. "I don't understand. They were my people." "They were," he said. "But they're afraid now." "You've seen too much?" The ship shuddered slightly as it entered a new sector. Outside, the stars stretched like silver rivers through the void. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Arik said, "You don't have to stay here, you know. I can get you to a neutral colony. You'll be safe." She looked at him, eyes filled with both fear and longing. "And you?" "I stay with my crew," he replied quietly. "That's my duty." Something inside her broke then, a sharp ache between her loyalty and her heart. She thought of her empire's order, her family, her home, and then she thought of him, the man who treated her not like a weapon or a symbol, but like a person. Her voice trembled. "What if I don't want to be safe without you?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Then you'd be walking into war." She smiled faintly. "War is all I've ever known." That night, Lariah couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, watching the blue stars drift past like ghosts. Her empire's words echoed in her head. "Kill the human. Redeem yourself." But when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Arik holding her hand as she bled. All she heard was his voice saying, "Not while I'm still breathing." The next morning, the human ship received a transmission, an encoded message from the Etherian fleet. Arik and the officers gathered in the command room. Lariah, still weak, entered quietly behind them. The message was short but deadly. "Surrender, the alien traitor, or we will annihilate your vessel." Gasps filled the room. Arik looked at the message once, then shut it off. He turned to the captain. "You know my answer." The captain nodded grimly. "We don't abandon our own." Lariah's heart twisted. They were calling her their own. Humans, the enemies of her people, now stood ready to die protecting her. As the human fleet prepared for battle, Lariah slipped away to the hangar. She looked at the rows of sleek fighters, their surfaces glowing faintly under the cold lights. She knew what she had to do. Arik found her there minutes later, his voice sharp. "Lariah, what are you doing?" She turned, her hand resting on the controls of a small interceptor. "They're after me," she said. "If I leave, they might stop." "You don't know that," he said firmly, stepping closer. "Yes, I do," she whispered. "They'll follow me." "Not you." He stared at her, realization sinking in. "You can't win against them," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm not trying to win," she replied softly. "I'm trying to save you." Before he could reach her, she sealed the cockpit. "Lariah, don't do this," he shouted, pounding against the hull. Through the glass, she smiled sadly, her tears falling. "You gave me life when I expected death," she said. "Let me return the gift." The engines roared to life, the hangar's lights flashing red. The ship's AI tried to override the launch, but Arik stepped back and whispered, "Let her go." The hangar doors opened, and her fighter shot into the stars outside. The enemy fleet moved like a wall of light. Lariah's ship darted between them, her voice trembling through the comms. "This is Lariah of the Ninth Line. I'm coming home." Her fleet focused on her signal immediately, turning away from the human ship. Arik listened as her voice faded in static. He wanted to order her back, to tell her she didn't have to prove anything. But deep down he knew. This was who she was. A warrior who found peace too late, through the chaos. Her last transmission came through, faint but clear. "Tell them humans aren't monsters," she said. "Tell them one human saved my soul." Then the signal was gone. Her ship vanished in a flash of plasma and silence. Arik stood frozen, staring at the empty void where her light had been. He whispered into the quiet, "You saved us all, Lariah." And for the first time even the cold stars seemed to mourn. 3 weeks passed since the battle. The human warship drifted through quiet space now, scarred but alive. Most of the crew had moved on, but Arik hadn't. Every night he sat in the observation deck, staring at the stars where she had vanished. He told himself she was gone, yet something inside refused to accept it. Lariah wasn't the kind of soul that disappeared quietly. She was fire and heart and defiance, and somehow, the silence of space still whispered her name. The ship's AI broke his thoughts one night. "Commander Dane, faint energy readings detected near the Eridan moon." He leaned forward, frowning. "Energy readings?" "Yes," the AI said. "Residual power signature, Etherion tech, life signs. Weak but present." His pulse quickened. "Show me," he said, voice low. A holographic map appeared, and there, a small fragment of wreckage. Drifting near the moon's shadow, Arik didn't hesitate. "Prepare a shuttle." The captain tried to stop him. "Arik, it could be a trap," he simply said. "Then let it be." The shuttle launched into the dark void. Dust and light mixed as they neared the wreck. The hull bore marks of heavy fire, and yet, a faint signal blinked. Slow, steady, Arik's heart slammed against his ribs. It was a life pod, cracked but intact, half buried in frozen debris. "Manual override," he ordered. The door hissed open, and cold vapor spilled into the air. Inside lay a figure wrapped in torn flight armor, her pale hair frozen against the glass. For a heartbeat he couldn't breathe. "Lariah?" he whispered. Her pulse was weak. Her skin cold, but she was alive. He pulled her into his arms, carrying her like something sacred. "Hold on," he said, voice breaking. "You're safe now." He didn't realize tears were streaming down his face until they touched her cheek. Back on the warship, the medbay lights glowed softly as they worked to revive her. Hours passed, and finally her chest rose with a shuddering breath. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and unfocused. The first thing she saw was him, sitting by her side, eyes red but smiling. "I told you not to die first," she whispered weakly. He laughed softly, the sound trembling. "You never listened to orders." When she tried to sit up, he stopped her gently. "You're safe," he said. "You're home." She looked around, confusion flickering in her gaze. "Home?" he nodded. "Here with us." Her lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears. "My people?" "They left," he said. "After the battle, they vanished into deep space. No signals, no pursuit." She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Then I really am alone," she whispered. Arik shook his head. "No, you're not." He took her hand warm against the cool air. "You're not our prisoner anymore, Lariah. You're one of us now." For a long time she said nothing, then she whispered, "You risked everything for me again." He smiled faintly. "You did the same." Days turned into weeks as she healed. She began walking through the ship again, quietly observing the humans who had once been her enemies. They greeted her without fear, some even with respect. She helped repair damaged consoles, assisted in translation with captured Etherian data, and though whispers followed her, the alien who saved the crew, no one dared speak ill of her when Arik was near. One evening she found him alone on the deck. The stars reflected in his eyes, and his voice was soft when he said, "Do you ever regret it? Saving me?" Lariah stepped beside him, her gaze on the horizon of light beyond the window. "No," she said simply. "Regret belongs to those who never tried to understand." He looked at her, and she smiled faintly. "I expected death from you," she said, her voice trembling. "But I was given life instead. Not just once, but every time you looked at me like I was worth saving." He reached for her hand, and for a moment, their fingers touched, gentle, unspoken, real. The hum of the engines filled the silence between them. It wasn't the sound of war anymore. It was the rhythm of peace. And for the first time since the war began, Lariah felt like she belonged to the stars, but peace was not quiet forever. The Council of Human Worlds heard of her survival, and soon, new messages came. Orders for Arik to bring her to Earth for questioning. Rumors spread of a possible peace treaty, one that needed her voice. She looked at Arik, her heart heavy but hopeful. "They want me to speak for both sides," she said softly. He nodded. "Then speak the truth." Her gaze lingered on him. "Will you come with me?" He smiled. "Always." As the ship turned toward Earth, Lariah stood at the viewport, the blue planet growing brighter in the distance. She whispered to herself, "I was born in war, but I will live in peace." Arik stepped beside her, their reflections glowing side by side in that light. The galaxy seemed to exhale, as if it too had been waiting for this moment. And far away, where wreckage still drifted in silence, a faint echo of her last words lingered in the black. "Tell them humans aren't monsters." Now at last the stars believed it too. The journey to Earth was long for Lariah. Every hour felt like another step into a new world she had never dreamed could exist. The ship glided through calm space, no longer hunted, no longer haunted by war, and yet inside her heart storm still raged quietly. When Earth finally appeared, a blue and white jewel floating in the dark, she gasped. The sight stole her breath. It was alive, beautiful, and endless. "So this," she whispered, "is where humanity began." Arik smiled beside her, his gaze soft. "Home," he said simply. She nodded, her eyes glimmering. "Now I understand why you fight so hard to protect it." When they landed, crowds waited at the edge of the skyport. Cameras hovered in the air, lights flashed, and soldiers stood at attention. An alien stepping onto human soil was more than history. It was a message to the stars that the war was over and peace had a face. The council summoned them almost immediately. In a grand hall made of glass and light, Lariah stood before admirals, diplomats, and scientists. Every gaze on her carried the weight of centuries of fear and anger. But she did not tremble. Arik stood behind her, silent but steady, her anchor in the sea of doubt. The head counselor spoke. "Lariah of the 9th line, do you understand why you're here?" She bowed her head slightly. "To speak truth," she said. "Then speak it," the woman said. "Tell us why peace should exist between us and your kind." Lariah took a deep breath, her heart pounding like a drum. She looked up, her voice calm but clear. "Because I expected death from humanity," she said. "But instead I was given mercy." The hall went still. She continued. "My people taught me to fear humans, to see them as beasts. But when I was captured, I saw something my empire could never teach, compassion." Her eyes found Arik's, and she felt courage rise in her chest. "I saw a man who saved a stranger, who protected me even when I didn't deserve it. He showed me that humanity's strength is not in its weapons, but in its heart." A quiet murmur spread through the chamber. She stepped closer to the center, her voice growing softer, more human. "You don't win peace through fear, you earn it through kindness. And that is something no empire can destroy." Silence followed. Deep, heavy, powerful. Even the counselors couldn't speak for a long moment. Then slowly the head counselor rose. "Perhaps," she said, "it is time the galaxy learned from humanity's mercy." The hall erupted in quiet applause. For the first time, Lariah smiled not as a soldier or a survivor, but as a bridge, living proof that two enemies could become more. Arik stepped forward and placed a small medal in her hand. "The Medal of Honor," he said softly. "For saving us and saving yourself." She looked at him, her throat tight. "You're the reason I could, that night." Earth celebrated, cities glowed with lights. People danced in the streets. Humans and off-worlders shared the same sky for the first time in history. From the balcony of the Capitol Tower, Lariah watched the ocean shimmer under the moon. She had never seen an ocean before. The waves stretched beyond the horizon, whispering peace in every sound. Arik joined her quietly, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. "You still can't sleep?" he asked. She smiled. "I'm afraid it might all be a dream." He handed her the cup, their fingers brushing. "It's real," he said softly. "You made it real, for a while." They stood in silence. The wind moved through her hair, cool and gentle. Finally, she turned to him, her voice trembling but sure. "When I first met you, I thought you were a monster." He chuckled lightly. A fair assumption. But then you became my reason to live, she said. He froze, the words sinking deep. Her eyes shimmered like the stars above them. You showed me what humanity really means. To care even when it hurts. Auric reached out, his hand hesitating before touching hers. It wasn't just me, he whispered. You reminded us what we were fighting for. She looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. Auric, she said softly, if I could choose where I belong now, it would be by your side. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled her gently closer. No grand speeches, no promises. Just the quiet truth between two hearts that had crossed galaxies to find one another. The stars above burned bright as if watching them with pride. For once, the universe felt small and full of peace below them. The waves crashed softly against the shore. The same rhythm echoed inside their chests. Different worlds, different blood, but the same heartbeat. In that moment, the war truly ended, because the line between human and alien had vanished, replaced by something greater, something fragile, pure, and infinite. It was not death that defined humanity. It was the ability to forgive, to rebuild, to love. And as Lariah leaned her head against Aric's shoulder, she whispered, I expected death from humanity. He smiled, eyes closed. And instead you found home.